Well, good evening, everyone. It is 5 p.m., and this is Tuesday, November 17th, City Council Work Session for the City of Iowa City, and I welcome each of you tonight. I am just going to make sure that we have our councilors present. I see Councilor Taylor. I am not seeing our Mayor Pro Tem. I did send out a message just to make sure that she will be joining, but we'll probably go ahead and get started today, and then we'll try to continue to get in touch with her. All right, so the first thing on our agenda tonight is discuss goals and expectations for the 2021 Affordable Housing Plan, and that is found in November 12th IP information packet, and that's IP3. And I'm going to invite our City Manager, Jeff Ruin, to kind of lead this discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. It's good to see everybody tonight. So you'll recall at your November 2nd work session, you went ahead and directed staff to proceed with the development of the Affordable Housing Action Plan. We included that memo with just kind of outlines the process we intend to take with the plan development in your packet as well. So you have that refresher. As we prepare to kick this process off, probably in January, February, once much of the budget is put to rest, it would be really helpful tonight to have the council discuss your goals and expectations for the plan. So we have outlined a few questions for you tonight, and really just hoping that those questions facilitate a discussion amongst the 6 or 7 of you, so that we can better understand what you'd like to see with this plan. So I can go through these one at a time, but again, these are intended to try to spur discussion on a whole range of topics related to the plan. So feel free to take it in any direction you want. And staff here, we're going to take some notes, and then we'll get to work on preparing for the plan kickoff. So the first question we have is, some of you may recall that in 2015, we did an updated market analysis related to housing in the community. That was done by our MPO staff and largely uses publicly available data from the US Census. We expect some new data to be released in early 2019, probably January, but maybe February. But we do want to see if there's any specific background data that the council wants to see with this effort. Depending on what you may want, we may have to hire a third party to assist us in collecting that data. So I'll start there and let you have that discussion.
All right, counselors. So just jump right in there.
Well, I'm going to ask a more general question that came across my mind in looking at trying to find other examples of housing studies that, for my purposes, I thought might help me be able to respond to some of these questions that we have for us. And what it suggested to me, one study in particular, was a study done in Bloomington, Indiana. It was just completed in July of this year, so July of 2020, a housing study. And in their case, the housing study was not limited to lower income households. It was a look at the market as a whole. And certainly the low income households are a critical focus of their study because it was identified to be a category of household type that was most in need of housing. But it really looked at all household incomes and the affordability, if you want to describe it as that, for all households, regardless of where they fall within their income bracket. I was kind of intrigued with that. It seemed I know we've had many discussions, this council and the previous council, regarding other segments of the housing sector, whether it's the student housing. In particular, there's been lots of development marketed for the students over the last several years, as well as considerable growth all over Iowa City. And I know I've been feeling a little bit concerned about where are we in terms of our housing market. Certainly the housing market as it relates to lower income households is a critical issue. But I felt that there might be some benefit to looking at that within a larger framework. So I just wanted to put that out there. The study that Wilmington undertook it did involve RDG, a consultant that Iowa City has worked with on both the bike master plan as well as the parks master plan. It was about a 100-page document. But I did feel as we're moving forward, I certainly have, I think obviously we all have concerns about affordable housing for our low income households, but what about housing for those 55 and older? What about housing for households that fall into the, say, the $45,000 to $70,000 income bracket? I think these are all important questions, and I began to ask myself, as we move forward and look within, say, a 10-year window, where are we with respect to all of those areas of our housing market? So, if we're to do that, it seemed like this would be the time to do it. So I just wanted to put that out there.
I mean, I appreciate you doing that, John. I like the idea because I think it's important that we get a full picture of where people in the city sit. And there, you referred to the sort of 55 and older, but this, as people get older, either if they don't have extra income, they may also be struggling. It's a valid question. And I think that getting a holistic picture is useful.
I wanted to acknowledge our Mayor Pro Tem has joined us. So welcome, Mayor Pro Tem, and also Ryan from USG is also here. We do have some questions before us. So if there is no more general comments before we kind of go through the questions I'll probably go ahead and get the questions started. We can start at number 1. And staff intends to update the 2015 market analysis as step 1 of the plan development. Are there any specific data sets, trends, or forecasts that the City Council would like to see as a part of this plan and effort? Some requests may necessitate third-party assistance. So I guess, yeah, we'll just jump right in there. As far as like the third-party assistance, I guess that'll be determined as we go through some of the process and get staff feedback on what they feel they can handle and what we may need to hire out.
I guess I would just ask kind of a background question. It's certainly been a while since I've looked at that market analysis, and newer counselors may not have seen it at all. Without going into too long an explanation, Jeff, could you give us kind of a brief summary of typically what would be in that market analysis when it's updated, and if things that John's talking about are already part of that or would expand that from what it has typically been to help people understand it a little bit better?
Yeah, you're going to get pretty high level census data, but you will get information on household income, cost burden status, things of that nature. And so we'll be able to show some trends based on past census data as well, which I think is pretty important. But what we were getting at, for example, would be if you wanted a kind of an analysis of rents in Iowa City. We might have to look for some assistance on that. Or so some counselors may recall a few years ago, we did a housing study with the university, and a consultant really drilled down into analyzing the student-oriented housing in and around Iowa City. Those are data sets that aren't necessarily readily available, and take some time, essentially, and in some cases surveying to gather that information. So I think for the most part, if I had to make some assumptions here, I think for the most part, council's probably going to be comfortable with the market analysis that's completed. But again, we just wanted to make sure we weren't overlooking anything very specific you were targeting.
I think it would be good to, John mentioned, and then I believe Janice did also, the senior population, because we all know that we've got a very aging population very quickly, and kind of see what proportion of those folks maybe. We have seen some new senior housing developments, but it would be good to know maybe what that need is, or what maybe that's a future need we need to look at.
Okay.
All right. Question number 2. The plan will provide a high-level look backward at the city's efforts to preserve and expand affordable housing since 2016. Are there any specific programs, projects, or policies that the city has pursued in recent years that the City Council wants to study in greater detail?
I think I can elaborate on this a little bit. So you've probably all seen at some point in your 10 years on the council, some reports from staff on number of households assisted at various income levels, renter versus owner occupied. We kind of aggregate all our program data and I give you some, again, high level statistics on how our local dollars are making an impact. And we intend to update that with this plan. But if there are specific programs that you really want kind of the finer level detail on, that would be helpful to know up front. We could expand upon our case studies, if you will.
I think it's a little too early to see what the partnership is between HACAP and I believe the Affordable Housing Coalition. That is a part of the South District program that we've started, but I would be interested in maybe having that as kind of a priority for how we're going to continue. But again, that's in its infancy phases of us just trying to test that model out. So far, it seems to be a good partnership, and having that in the South District has been a positive as well. And so for me, that would be one of the affordable housing projects that I would like to see moving forward.
I think the question of partnerships, I think, is a really important one. If we're going to accelerate the housing plan with respect to affordability, it seems like I would almost say it's essential that we develop further partnerships. And then also, in looking backward, I think that provides an opportunity for really kind of evaluating where we've had successes with the work that we've done, perhaps where we're, in effect, kind of a cost benefit analysis of the work that we've been doing and seeing where we've had the most benefit on the projects and policies that we've developed thus far.
I'd be interested in taking a good look at fee in lieu. Not that we necessarily need more detail, but from a higher level policy standpoint, it seems like we talk about it every time, we have a big development in terms of some level of discomfort of how it's used, or, the idea of it even, and the benefits of having on-site instead. So, just making sure that that conversation happens, I guess, as part of the plan is important to me.
I have to say that's important to me as well. I've been very vocal about fee in lieu of. I also think that it is a greater conversation, but fee in lieu of, for me, as I've mentioned in the past, is not worth it. It's not worth the missing out on the experience of for people to live in whatever housing project is being developed. And so whether that's student housing or just different housing in the downtown or riverfront crossing area. So I would love to have that conversation.
Thank you.
I think kind of going along with what John said about cost benefit, I'd be interested in maybe having a conversation about land banking. If I recall correctly, we maybe change that or de-emphasize that in an amendment to some of the allocation of funding. And so, not necessarily needs to be a focus, but just making sure that we, keep in mind that as an option. And to me, that seems like a really expensive option. And so just tying that in and that cost benefit question.
And
All
I'm
right.
not sure, I'm not sure whether this applies to this question or one of the later questions, but I'd also like to take a look at the period of affordability and how long we believe we should maintain affordability in certain units or in housing, because it seems to me that the current period, at least for a place like Riverfront Crossings, is too short.
I think we've also had some discussion about the annexation policy, which requires that when it's annexed, that a certain percentage has to be affordable if it's developed. So I'd kind of like to look further into that and see how many of those areas have been developed and what they have had for affordable housing and what they considered affordable.
Okay, that's very helpful. It sounds it sounds like we'll probably end up doing a pretty detailed overview of each of the different programs and policies that we've provided. I think we can do some good cost benefit and look at, what the cost per unit or the cost per unit per year is when you factor in the affordability, and hopefully show you some of the varying impacts across the community.
All right. Number 3, a public input strategy will be developed by the steering committee. Are there any specific expectations that the city council has for this public input effort? Some strategies, such as community-wide surveys, may require third-party assistance and additional time.
Yeah, this again, I think you're familiar with most of our community outreach efforts that have been associated with master plans, whether it's climate action or Parks and Rec. We just, again, want to make sure that if you had something specific in mind that will require some preparation or maybe some expense, that we're preparing for that, preparing for that step. So we use the community survey as one example. That would be an expense and a timely, a time-consuming effort if that's what you want to do.
I think the model of the listening posts, like we recently did with the police issue, seemed to work well in, going to different parts of the community and having sort of educational presentations along with the opportunity to get public input. I really like that idea, and hopefully COVID might allow that in the spring.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard for me to answer that one. it's something that my notes here are that perhaps as the program begins to emerge and develop and articulate a little bit further, I would have a better idea as to how, the public engagement would be structured. But it's hard for me to comment on that one right now.
When I thought about this question, I thought about some of our social service agencies that deal with individuals that currently have live in affordable housing or have a need for affordable housing. Maybe there could be some type of surveys that get filtered through them as well, so that we can have some input, more robust input, I guess. All right, number 4. Are you comfortable with the plan analyzing the impact and cost effectiveness of non-housing based solutions that could alleviate cost burden households, or hold the plan focused solely on housing?
I'm comfortable with it, including those things. I mean, we've had a little bit of discussion along that line. Are there other things that we can do? Certainly, as we look at, retooling our transportation, we look at, potentially expanding programs for those in need on utilities, et cetera. I think those all affect how much people can reasonably afford in terms of housing. So, and sometimes, particularly like with transportation, they really work together in terms of where that housing is located, where the jobs are. So I would very much support looking at things besides just the housing.
Yeah, I spoke on this at our last conversation over this study, and I mentioned at the time that it seems to me it's really worthwhile looking at affordable housing or housing in general, for that matter, again, as it relates to transportation. Estimates are that if you look at transportation and housing together, they consume perhaps 50% of household income. But one of the points that can be made, of course, is if you have affordable housing in a location where there's good transportation alternatives, it's possible to dedicate more of your income, household income, toward housing because your transportation costs go down. So it's important in that regard as well, I feel, because it makes a clear link between housing and transportation and how important it is to coordinate it. If you don't coordinate it, even though you may meet the 30% with respect to housing, your transportation costs may be much higher. So I think looking at them together is really the most sensible way to do it.
I agree on a holistic approach rather than just housing. I think that's a good idea.
I'm going to share the screen so that the questions can be right up before us and the public. I'm going to see if all right. Can everybody see that now? Great. All right. Any other comments on that one? Number 5, staff will project out future affordable housing revenue streams based on the current budget allocations. Does the City Council want the plan to assume current funding levels or account for the possibility of new dedicated revenue sources?
I would certainly like to consider new dedicated revenue sources. I think we've mentioned the idea of possibly including it in a local option sales tax. I would add to that the possibility of general obligation bonds perhaps being a possible source of revenue. Again, it kind of folds back to we need to get a really clear understanding of what, how many housing units are we short in terms of affordability. If we can try to get a better idea of what the financial need will be, then I think that would help us understanding what the revenue sources required to meet that need will need to be.
As we know, we're living in some really uncertain times right now. We're just not really sure where things are going to go, and we didn't know where. Oh, am I in there? And where the revenue sources would come. And I actually had some community members have talked to me about a local option sales tax, which surprised me because, as most of you that have been around a while know, the community wasn't always in favor of that, but they're seeing it now as a big for revenue, particularly for affordable housing and childcare. So I would be in favor of that, looking at alternate means.
I certainly think it'd be necessary to look at other revenue sources, and the steering committee, I would hope that we'll have some people on there that could help identify some of those, as well as our talented staff, looking into other sources that they may be aware of, or reaching out to other communities or affordable housing gurus throughout the states just to see what's out there.
Really appreciated with our recent transportation plan proposal that there was the sort of cost bound recommendations, and then if there's additional revenue, what could be added on top of that. So I don't know if that model is translatable, but I found that particularly helpful.
I think that's a great.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Janice, sorry.
So I agree with Councilor Burgess. Also, one of the great things about the way it was presented in the transportation study was here's what you have, and then here are the other things that this much in funds would get you with it, either with having to in that case it was with having to buy extra equipment or something. But I thought it was a really useful model. I agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, because I think we all are very much aware that we could be really, really constrained going forward in our budgets, depending on how all this COVID stuff plays out. And so I think it's certainly good to account for the possibility, but we certainly have to be aware that, one, there may not be that extra revenue, and we may, I mean, I would hate to think, but we may not even be able to keep up the revenue stream that we've, the resources that we have given to affordable housing, depending on how all this shakes out. So I wouldn't want a plan that came in as if we were going to have all these additional revenue streams when we don't know anything for sure. So I like the way that you phrased it, Laura.
I think I like the way that Councilor Burgess phrased it, because it really does begin with the end in mind. In my thought process, we think big, and then we get down to maybe a few steps of what we can do right now, but ultimately having a goal to get to that big plan. So that's how I think about what Councilor Burgess said. Number 6, are there any specific new programs, projects, or policies that the City Council wants investigated with the development of this new plan?
I'd like to see staff continue to look for changes that we can make to our zoning regulations that would allow perhaps for infill housing, for duplexes, triplexes, or fourplexes in some areas where it's currently not allowed, that could create opportunities in neighborhoods that don't currently exist.
Yeah, what Janice just mentioned, I think, was one of the missing. It's in the current Affordable Housing Action Plan. We just haven't completed it. So I think that is an important piece moving forward. Others, and I would just reference that that Bloomington, Indiana plan. It had a really wide range of programs and policies that we might consider. Certainly tax abatement would be one. There was reference to small area tax increment financing. There are just really a whole lot of ideas out there that we could be looking at, and that particular study I thought did a good job of reaching out and pulling a lot of those into their report.
The final question is number 7. Are there other goals or expectations for the plan that staff should understand?
I'll just mention a couple. I'm trying to, for myself, what's the vision that I'm trying to articulate here? And I think in terms of timeline, I'd personally would like to look at this as a 10-year plan. So in terms of a time frame, and making dramatic strides in terms of meeting our affordability within that 10-year period. I also mentioned in the past the idea of tying our program for housing in a neighborhood framework. I think it's important, to acknowledge and differentiate housing as it relates to different parts of Iowa City, so that there's a good match in that regard. If we do, as Janice had suggested, look for infill opportunities, I think that really, to be successful with that kind of program, you need to have a much better understanding of the neighborhood context. And also that housing doesn't exist in isolation. There are important considerations that can come into play when you put it within a neighborhood framework. Obviously, transportation would be one of those pieces. But you could also be looking at other ways that you could improve the quality of life as you address the affordable housing piece as well.
I'd add one more thing, which is I think we need to be careful not to make sure that we're not leaving students out of the equation. And one of the ideas that I had mulled over during the campaign, like a little over a year ago, was trying to figure out how to marry up people who would like to stay in their houses. For example, seniors who really may not be able to do all the heavy lifting and maintenance on their own, with students who could, or young families, or someone who could really live in a portion of the house for a reduced rent in exchange for certain services. So I don't know if that's a realistic approach, but there are different ways to make housing work and make it affordable.
I'd be interested in us establishing some metrics on which to track our success. I mean, I think especially with the action plan, it was like, we want to get these programs underway and accomplish these, some very discrete, concrete things. It'd be great, like with the climate action plan, right? We have a goal relating to our greenhouse gas emissions. Are there goals that we can set relating to how we measure affordable housing and what is the proportion of families and individuals who are cost burden in the community? I mean, that kind of thing that we can push towards, starting with that end in mind, and be able to kind of track our progress.
All right. Well, Jeff, you feel like you have enough?
Yes, I appreciate it. That was very, very helpful and will help us get off to a good start with this. So again, just from a time frame standpoint, we'll do some behind the scenes work as staff over the next month and a half. Not a whole lot, but we'll try to get this really kicked off and moving pretty good in January or early February.
Great, thank you. All right, COVID-19 update. So we do know that our governor on the 16th, which that was yesterday, gave some new mandates. So I'll just open it up for now.
I mean, we've said it all multiple times, but the situation is really serious. The situation is the most serious, I believe, that it's been since the beginning of the pandemic. Hospitals are full or at capacity or nearly at capacity. I believe UIHC is now basically adding intensive care beds and shifting staff around. So, I mean, if you're not wearing a face covering all the time, staying home when you can, social distancing and all the rest, if you haven't been doing that, this is the time to start doing it. We don't need our health system to collapse. We need everyone to be part of the solution right now. What the phrase that I've been using is public health isn't a popularity contest. It really is public health, and it's a life or death matter.
I felt that I got more out of our joint entities meeting and the Think Iowa webinar that was a couple of days before that, as far as information about, what's going on out there in the state. It was very helpful to hear from the professionals that are out there dealing with this, the head of the hospital and Sam Jarvis from Department of Public Health. So it's still not really clear to me what the governor was trying to say as far as what the extent of a mask mandate was as such, and confused about the 10 o'clock closing time and the numbers that can be inside versus outside. And I'm just afraid that a lot of people still are very confused about those recommendations.
Yeah, I have to agree that the governor's orders were a little confusing. And so I personally won't even try to share what those were tonight, because I feel like you really have to read the order and dissect it to really understand who's affected by the order, who's exempt from the order, per line item. The indoor gatherings of 15 or more people, how that's prohibited, and the outside gatherings of 30 or more people. So I would encourage people really to go to the governor's website and look at the order themselves, because and bring your notepad in order for you to be successful at adhering to all the things that has been ordered.
Well, and certainly our local mask mandate is still in place. And I mean, Jeff, maybe if you can just remind people, I think I seem to recall, like, for example, for bars, if there's reporting that's different than what we're asking people to report, or maybe just go over how to report if there's an issue or concern with non-compliance.
Sure. Yes, what we're asking folks to do is to contact our police department non-emergency number. And I'm not quick enough to pull that up, and it's not committed to memory, but it is 319-356-6800. That's again the non-emergency number, and we will dispatch an officer to investigate the concern.
Yeah.
I would just add that in case there's any doubt that this is serious, the senior senator from Iowa has now tested COVID positive, as has a new representative.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and so we've talked about this a lot, and I would like to say again that masks are effective in reducing the spread of COVID, but there are additional measures that are equally important. I was thinking about today, and I kind of like to compare it to like making a cake, and you get all the ingredients, but you don't have the flour in there, so it's just not the same. So you need all the ingredients because they're all important. And the one that kind of stands out to me that people seem to forget is to avoid touching your face. Carry a little hand sanitizer with you, because you just don't even realize the number of surfaces that you touch, doorknobs, door handles, the keypads on an ATM, keypads on the card chargers at the grocery stores, etc. Those kinds of things. Then you reach up and touch your face or touch your mask, and it's really important to avoid that, to avoid your eyes and your nose and your mouth. and use hand sanitizer when you aren't able to wash your hands with soap and water.
All
And I
right.
think it's worth emphasizing just that we do know how the disease spreads, and we know so much more than we did in the spring. In the spring, we were very afraid, right? We didn't know what would be all the modes of transmission, and having a much better understanding of how much more dangerous indoors is than outdoors, and being able to apply that, knowing that right now there's a lot of spread in households, a lot of spread in small family groups. And that, please don't make that exception, right? Limit your contact to those who are in your household, and know that just that one time of having a few people over, or just that one time of being indoors, not wearing a mask when you're with others, really is what's causing a lot of spread right now, according to our public health experts. So just, be consistent. It isn't a mystery, right? It may be hard, it may be inconvenient, it may be frustrating, but we know how. So I think we can take hope in that and really just apply for ourselves that consistency, because we also know that a vaccine should be on the way. And if we can really buckle down for a few months, I mean, light at the end of the tunnel is incredibly, incredibly helpful. So now we know masks all the time indoors, and keeping your distance. And like Pauline said, that hand hygiene as well.
All right. We are going to move on, and we're going to go to Black Lives Matter movement and systemic racism. Um, I know that today is going to be a day where we talk about the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where we'll be having that discussion in our formal meeting tonight at 7 p.m. We'll be making those appointments. And so I would recommend that people definitely save any of that conversation for the 7 p.m. meeting. Other than that, any updates anyone would like to share on this item? I know that we went through last meeting and line by line, just to give an update where we were. And it seemed like you were continuing with the affordable housing conversation and plan. The reconciliation, Truth and Reconciliation Commission is going to be today. And I think we are definitely on track at covering, keeping on track with some things. And we'll have a discussion about the Juneteenth as well a little later.
And Mayor, I can just a quick update on just what's changed in the last couple of weeks in the report. One, you're considering your legislative priorities tonight. So based on our work session discussion that we had on November 2nd, I assume those will be adopted and move forward. At your last meeting, we took from the council discussion that part of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's task is going to be really looking into the artistic expression part of the resolution. So we will note that as part of the task for that new commission. And then the Juneteenth holiday, we'll be announcing this Thursday. That does not require any council action, but we'll be updating the council in your weekly information packet this Thursday. So that's where the bulk of the progress was. And of course, staff is continuing to work very hard on the preliminary plan that we'll present to you at your December 15th work session.
Great.
I also don't want to overlook the your CPRB is working hard too on their piece of this, and I expect that they'll have their recommendations and thoughts to you in the coming month as well. So it's not just staff that's working on this. You've got commissions and parts of the community that are also working on this report as well.
Great. All right, thank you. Any other updates or comments? Clarification of agenda items. Okay, we're going to move on to info packet discussions. And we'll start with the November 5th info packet, and then we'll slowly move down to November 12th. But start with the November 5th.
I just wanted to call people's attention to the racial equity report card. I thought there was a lot of useful information in there, and some are positive, some not quite so positive, but basically the transparency is really the key as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
I did have a question on that. There was some reporting, I think it was in the DI this week, that was kind of highlighting the percentage increase in certain charges. This would be criminal charges by race. And so I just wanted to get clarification kind of publicly on if that's because we're using gross numbers for that. So overall number of stops or charges increases, or is it proportionate?
I'm not sure I'm following that. Can you repeat that?
Sure. So I'm looking in the info packet. It's on page 6 of the PDF. The actual racial equity report card, for example, has traffic stops by race and ethnicity. And so there's between 2015 and 2019, the number of, for example, traffic stops of Black or African American individuals was up by 36%. And so as I did the math, that looks like the gross number, not as a percentage of population. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And so I think it might be helpful. I believe we track that in our the study that's done annually, and do that as a proportion of overall population. But I just wanted to make sure that we weren't, I felt like it was a little misleading, not misleading, but just maybe is leaving that piece of the picture out, that if by population or by percentage of population, those stops are going down, that's what we want to see. That's what we want to celebrate. And so just wanted to highlight that increase is not proportionate.
Yeah, and just as a reminder, the traffic stop data that we present annually uses observations as the baseline. So we don't even use the census population, but the St. Ambrose University that does that for us actually does physical observations of the driving public. And that's the baseline, because there's different makeups of the driving public in different locations in town. So when we study that disproportionality, we really get to a finer level of detail compared to what you see here on the racial equity report card. This is meant to be kind of high level transparency. It's really meant for you and for the public to ask more questions and what do you see here that needs more explanation? How can we provide you that data? We know that traffic stops is a great point of focus and has been for the council for some time. And that's why we typically dedicate a work session to that topic alone every year.
All right.
I did want to mention in that packet as well, you will have seen the update from the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County, and just accounting for how they're using our funds. I think it's really encouraging as they look at some of the projects in the queue that they've funded. You can see those right there, just to see that there's a number of different affordable housing projects kind of in the hopper, waiting to waiting to happen over the next month or so. And clearly our dollars are making an impact in helping those move forward.
All right, IP, well, November 12th, information packet. And I know that we'll discuss the IP6, so maybe we'll start there. Because many things in this IP we've already discussed.
Yeah, so thanks, Mayor. We wanted to get this in front of you for just some direction, make sure you're comfortable with this. But as you know, we have not, we suspended water shutoffs at the onset of the COVID pandemic. In this memo, we provided you an update on what the past due situation looks like. And I think when Dennis chimes in, he'll have some updated numbers. But what we're seeing is some really rapid growth in those past due numbers. At the time the memo was written, just in the last month, we had seen over $120,000 in new past due funds. We're working hard to connect our residents with the state utility relief program and the local relief programs that you all have funded and that we've received some federal dollars for. But we really need to think about how we're going to emerge from this in a very sensitive way with the public. And that's really what the staff has tried to do here, is to think about how we move forward. We're obviously not wanting to shut off anybody's water during the pandemic. We want to connect folks with resources and make sure that they're assisted in all way possible. But we also have to run the water utility and make sure that we have the funds to continue to support that critical operation that we do. So what we're suggesting here is that as of February 1st of next year, we take all those past due amounts and we focus on developing payment plans for those past due amounts. And then those won't impact any water shutoff decisions going forward. So I kind of think of that as kind of the COVID balance. And then looking ahead, we start fresh, and we're really intentional about how we're trying to work with our customers to make sure that they know about the low income discount program, to make sure that they know about any other resources that are out there for utility relief, and hopefully get them in a more stable situation to which they can keep up with the utility payments going forward. And then the other key piece of this is the water rate increase that we had scheduled for this past July, which the mayor has delayed a couple of times with his emergency orders. We'd like to suggest that that be delayed again till next July, which would make it a full year's delay. So Dennis can chime in with some updated numbers if you have them, Dennis. Anything I missed, you can fill in. But again, just looking for some counsel, your level of comfort with this plan, so that we can be prepared and kind of proactive in working with our water customers.
I can add that we did start to implement portions of this in October, where we did send out letters. We did expand the low-income discount program. And as we started making efforts to connect people to those resources at the Centers for Workers' Justice, the community, and the shelter house, as well as the state. And we try to get the word out there to get that assistance to people. And through those efforts over the past 6 weeks or so, the number of outstanding accounts has dropped from 1,096 to 850. And the dollar amount owed has dropped from 293,000 to 256,000. So we have seen some improvements in those outstanding balances and exiting the amounts that are owed. We did meet as a group, the Public Works Director, the water utility management staff, the utility billing management staff, and myself to talk about kind of prudent ways that we could help customers, and then try and return to normal operations. And we try to take a little bit of a longer range view to really target kind of the end of the fiscal year to try and really get things back to normal. And this is the program that we came up with. So it really, like I said, tries to provide that assistance where it is necessary. And fortunately, like the state did offer a program that fits in well to this program. And I guess I can just try and answer whatever questions you have if you read through there as far as how it'll work and what we intend to do.
I have questions related to the changes implemented in March 2020. So number 3, so I understand that the city discontinued filing liens against delinquent properties and transferring uncollected amounts to the city's contracted collection agency. Do you know, because I think one of the future steps that is being suggested is that we would transfer this back to Valley Collection Services. Do you know if, when it goes to them, if that becomes a part of their credit as being delinquent?
We did have that conversation, and it does not. Valley Collection Services really is not what I'd say is a hardcore collection agency. What they do is more soft type collections, and they really offer a wide range of collection services. And we can really dictate of how we want them to do that. And that would include, mostly like setting up payment plans, which we really don't have the software or the staff to manage 1,000 payment plans where they do. So they can set payment plans, they can keep it off people's credit. They can do all sorts of things that you wouldn't associate normally with a collection agency. They're really more of a service business that would be managing these receivables for us. And so we can dictate to what level we want those collections to be. And right now the conversations have been about really just setting up payment plans, making those connections, and handling the collection of those balances.
So if this was to go to the collections entity, what will be our efforts at sharing some of the assistance programs with these individuals that have these late payments?
Well, right now we're trying to, we have sent 2 rounds of letters to everybody with a past due balance. And we're also making phone calls to everybody that has a past due balance. We've also issued press releases and put on our website. And so we're really making a lot of efforts to connect with everybody that has an outstanding balance, to hook them up with the state program or one of the city programs for them to be able to take care of those balances. And so there would really not be anybody on this list that hasn't been contacted several times or at least attempted to in a number of different ways prior to that they would ever go to a third party. And really the idea of the third party is just so they can manage that receivable. And from our end, we'll start a clean start for that individual. And rather than saying you owe us $300, they can set whatever payment plans that can be managed. And from our perspective, for water shutoffs, late fees, cardings, that's all a clean slate.
Okay. I just want to make sure that council understood you correctly, that if this was, if all the late payments were to go to the Valley Collection Services, then the services that will continue with the city would be a clean slate per se. And so if I understood you correctly, that amount, once it transfers over to Valley Collection Services, they'll work with them to try to collect those payments on a payment plan or whatever the case may be. But with the city services, it will then be at a balance of 0, and then their new bill coming out would just be whatever that new balance is without any old balances. Is that what I understand?
That's correct. Anything that would be less than 30 days old would not go to them. And everything would be written off from our perspective that's older than 30 days old. And the intention of, we looked at setting up payment plans in-house for those people that owe those balances. But, our software is programmed in a way that it's really not designed to handle that. It's designed to go through the collection process that we have, that we operate with, not to really stray too far outside of that. And in addition,
You froze up.
to that, due to the quantity, and we didn't know how many that was going to end up being. And so, managing 1,000 payment plans on top of our normal collections is just really not something we're staffed or set up to do. And so that's where, we contacted with Valley, because really, essentially they're just, acting as an arm of the city just to handle those collections. They wouldn't do things like take them to court, file liens, or any of those things that you might associate with collection. It's really more a receivable management.
But what's the city going to benefit from sending them to collection anyway?
Well, I said collection, a lot of people send those to collection and they think of collection as they're going to do whatever they can to get that money out of these individuals. This is really just managing as an extension of our current billing system for something that we're not programmed to handle. And that is to set up payments with a large number of accounts to help them pay those balances back. And it doesn't impact their water shut off or late fees or anything of that nature.
I guess believe this is for normal time is understandable. I don't know, but now I don't know how we going to benefit, even though we know that the city done a very good job by allocating a lot of money, to some organizations and referring people to state programs and all this. Why we just wait, for before we send them to the collections, because I don't see a direct benefit from sending them right now.
Well, they would not be sent until after February. So they have a chance to through city programs, state programs, to pay that bill off up to that point. And so there's funds available to allow them currently to pay those balances off. And so really this is later down the road. And even those that would qualify for assistance, we're offering an additional discount program that they would qualify for through the end of the fiscal year that normally they maybe would not. So in addition to being allowed to make a payment plan for old balances or getting them written off through a state or city program, they would also be eligible for a discounted water bill through the end of the fiscal year, which hopefully would be everything would look differently come next June, but I guess there's no guarantee of that.
But Dennis, to be honest with you, all these programs that pay assistance for people, they don't pay collection bill, but they pay city bill, the water bill. When you take that out from their bill will reflect the current amount, which is not true. And normally, they ask you to send your bill, and you have to send your bill that doesn't have this money because this money went to collections. And as soon as in collection, I don't think like the state programs or any program will pay collection bill.
Well, I'm not sure how long the state program is going to be around. And if they're eligible for that state program, we're trying to get them connected with those programs or city programs now. I mean, we would not set them up on separate payment plans until after February.
Yeah, currently the state program is set to expire in December, first or second week of December, I believe. And I think as Dennis mentioned, we can really set the parameters with Valley. So if there are other programs, utility relief programs that surface after the new year when these balances are out there, we can work to make sure. I mean, ultimately, it's our utility, so we can work through the collection Valley Collections to ensure that those balances are eligible for whatever programs are designed. It could be that it's just our local programs remaining. We don't know if the state will come out with a new one, and in that case, we set the rules for both the utility system and the relief system. So I'm pretty confident we can make that work.
For the city, maybe, yeah, because it is the city and city can do whatever for their money. But I mean, like right now with new transition, or like with new presidents come out, maybe something from the federal will come out, and for everyone, and that's at least gonna take until after February to be implemented. So they are not going to be eligible. I know that. From my experience, collections is not eligible for those kind of things. Maybe the city money that, and even I don't have, since it's federal, also it will be eligible for collections, to pay collection money for water. Yes, some thought here.
Okay, this is Pauline. I'd just like to thank you, Dennis, and your staff for the time and consideration you've taken on this project over the last several months to help our most vulnerable members of our population that are going through this crisis. And while I do have concerns about our decreased revenue and for how long we could sustain that level of decrease, I like the project, except I'm not comfortable with the February date for turning the accounts over to the collection agency. Because as we all know, the number of positive cases here in Johnson County has continued to skyrocket. So the crisis that warranted the original assistance plan is actually worse than when we first approved the plan. So I would prefer that we would hold off on reporting those delinquent accounts till maybe early spring or even closer to the July date.
From my perspective, some of the things I've heard here, that influence my response to this is, one, the amount that you mentioned, Dennis, that had been paid down, was it somewhere between 30 and 50,000? You mentioned the balance had gone down.
Right. Yeah. So it's been paid down about $37,000 since we started sending letters and contacting. And the phone calls are really just to try and inform people about state and local assistance programs.
So I think a couple of things happen here. There are definitely lots of people who are not paying their water bill because they can't, and we need to help them. There's no question about that. There are also people who, when they realize that there's no late fees and no penalties, will push it off even when they can afford to pay it. And they will, they'll put it as a lower priority or whatever. And certainly I think for that amount to have been paid off in that amount in that short period of time, since these calls and letters have started going out, indicate that there are people who do have the means to pay it off. And I think it's important that the city get its finances for an enterprise fund like our water fund to make sure that they're on track. There's nothing more important than being able to provide clean water for the members of our community. I think that the plan that the staff has put together is incredibly compassionate in terms of working with an agency that is not going to report these to the credit bureau. I trust with what Jeff says, if they can work with this agency to make sure that any balances that they are holding can somehow be labeled so that they would qualify for any programs that might come out there. I believe that staff would be able to make that happen. So I think this is going to be inevitable. And I think the longer we go on, it just helps people dig themselves deeper. But in the meantime, we've got staff that are really working hard to get them connected to any programs out there as quickly as possible. So I'm supportive of what staff has put together.
Dennis, I have another question. You just said that this collection agency will not report this to the credit bureau. You mean, like, for example, if you send me to the collection now and I did not pay it at all, this is not gonna affect the credit.
That's correct.
And the city is still going to give me water.
That's correct. Now, I
It
will
doesn't
say
make
that we are given the direction to Valley. I mean, they will do whatever we ask them to do. So, you know, that would be maybe the current direction we would give them now. You know, and as they go through that process, and there's still accounts that are unpaid after that, you know, then the council would have that discretion to take a look at that program. But you know, I believe that most people once, you know, like the ones now when we're touching base with them are making their payments if they can, and I believe most individuals will set up payment plans and make payments if they can, and so at least I'm optimistically thinking that that would be a minority of the people that would do neither.
I think the council needs to know, and I think staff realizes that we're not going to collect 100% of these balances. It's just not going to happen. And if we're not willing to take a hard stance, then we just have to accept that, and we're going to have some past dues that we just never collect. But staff is comfortable with that. We think this approach aligns with your values and with our previous conversations that we've had with you. I think the important thing is we got to keep that balance from ballooning up so high to where it has a really negative impact on our utility accounts. And this was the balance that we struck that we think will be able to help us get back on our kind of normal process, but also treat people very fairly, very patiently, and in a non-punitive manner.
I guess I would am generally supportive, referring to what Councilor Taylor said. Given when the new administration comes in and the unknowns of that right now with respect to the U.S. Senate, the control of the U.S. Senate, and if or when there may be another relief package coming, I would be more comfortable that if it pushed off one more month, so that to give what the new administration basically 2 months to see if February and March to see what they're able to do. Otherwise, I think it's a reasonable way to proceed. And my main goal is that we not cut off water and make life tougher for people who are already having a really hard time under COVID, or put them in a very difficult situation with respect to repaying. And if we can, and if we're doing that, then that meets my value goals.
Yeah, I at first, when I read the memo, was concerned, I think for the same reasons that Councilors Taylor and Weiner referenced in terms of the timing. But hearing more of the details and understanding kind of the clean slate and payment plan idea, I think this is actually a benefit for those residents who want to start getting out from under that through, having a payment plan. Because otherwise, as I understand it, if we delay the implementation of something like this, then they'll just continue to accrue past due balances without the benefit of a payment plan, with us just kicking the can as to how those get dealt with. So I think this is a very measured and, again, non-punitive way to come up with a compromise that allows us to collect from those who can in a way that is, doable for them without punishing those who can't.
I really, for myself, I really think that we really don't want to send this to collection on February 1st. And also we don't want to shut down the water starting March 1st. This is, I think we need to wait until we, to see what happened and what's coming. Earlier, I heard a lot of council, especially Yanis and Laura, said that the pandemic right now is really very bad, more than ever. And if we did not shut the water or did not send them to collections and give them break and beginning of the pandemic, and now this is going to happen all over again, and a lot of people is still going to lose their job. A lot of people is still are not going to find job, and given the fact that there is, you know, new administrations coming, maybe they will give us something, and also given the fact that, you know, the collections bill is not going to be paid by all those reliefs, you know, like assistance money out there, given the fact that the state program right now taking over 1 month to approve the utility. I have a lot of people that we help them apply for the state, but they did not get it yet. And, you know, I see a lot of people at the Center for Worker Justice. You know, if you see the report that we send it to the city, we just being writing check to the city of Iowa City and writing check to the Mid-America. A lot of people just suffering from those two. You know, the housing was very good by the state. State was, you know, like approving the housing very quick. But, you know, for somehow the utility, maybe because they give it to another organization or another company, it taken a little bit, you know, time. I just believe that let us push it a little bit and see what the next, you know, the coming months bringing to us, like February, and after March, we can decide, you know, what we're going to do. I really don't support shutting off the water on February, on March, and sending the collection in February.
I wasn't hearing anything about shutting water off, was I?
It's number 4 of C.
Yeah, I think say March 1st, resume shutting the water, yeah.
Mhm.
But if people get in the payment plan and their slate is wiped clean with the city, then they won't be in a position, hopefully, that would be an issue at that point.
I really appreciate what the city does. You know, we being like really setting the standard high for all the city around us. We from the money that, you know, we receive from county and from the city, we've been helping people paying their utility, water especially, and even for the other cities that doesn't have the same thing. See, Iowa City really set the standard high because we have all this assistance available. But believe me, there is some people still they don't know about this. When the people come there, they have $600, over $600 for us to pay, and we cannot go over 600. And sometimes they have 600 for water, and they have electricity. We have to divide the 600 that the Center for Worker Justice maximum can give. I just want to tell you that people is still some people they don't know. That's why we refer them to a lot of people. So just give them a little time. This pandemic's really hurting them bad. And everybody's care about their credit. And a lot of people, they don't know that the city is not shutting the water, by the way. They will say like, oh, they're gonna, this is now become 600. Of course, they're gonna shut down my water. So just give them chance, please.
I have a question about, so February 1st, that's when all the utilities will be switched over to this collection agency. So anything up until, I'm assuming the 31st of January, or maybe it's the end of December, all of those payments will be, that are 30 days plus overdue, will go to Valley Collection Services. Is that correct?
Once we would turn over to Valley, so we would zero out their accounts in our system.
Correct.
And so at that point, they would be contacted by Valley to set up payment plans for whatever that they could pay, whether $5, $10 a month or whatever. And at that point, you know, we would just resume our normal billing process where they would get a bill. It would be due within a certain time period and so forth.
So what old bills would be in that, like what date around would be given over to Valley?
It would be around that. And they don't necessarily have a date cutoff. They go in billing cycles. So like that first billing cycle of February, you know, those bills would go out for normal. Past due balances that would be more than 30 days old prior to that we would create a file of those past due accounts. And then we would hand that over to the agency, and then they would try to set payment plans for those individuals.
So potentially December and January could be turned over to the collection agency. Is that correct?
No, I mean, maybe the bills that they would owe could be for December and January, but they would not be turned over. As they turned over, they would not be set for payment plans until after February 1st.
Okay.
And they could still pay up to that February date. They could still pay their city bill with the city.
I'm trying to understand, like, let's say I haven't paid my water bill since October. And then, because I didn't have the funds. And so I'm trying to figure out what amounts could be turned over to Valley Collection as a separate request for funds. And then I understand that we'll reset the account within the city to zero. That's what I'm trying to get at. And I don't know that I understand that correctly.
Well, sure. So for instance, say you have an outstanding water bill now. So you haven't paid for a couple months. So right now we would direct you to one of the agencies or the state program. And so if you had a COVID related reason for not paying your bill at the state, or with whatever they're collecting at shelter house and so forth, they would pay your bill for you. So then you would owe nothing. So if you would go to one of these agencies and they would pay your bill. And right now we're not adding any fees, we're not adding any charges. If it was not COVID related, you would not be eligible for one of those programs. We still would not be adding fees or trying to collect your account. So right now, if you have a COVID related reason that you're not paying your bill, the state will pay your bill off for you. Or, we have assistance programs that will give them money to help pay their bill. Even though maybe they don't have that COVID related reason they're not paying their bill, we are not currently actively taking steps to collect those bills, other than maybe them getting a statement in the mail. So come February, if you had a COVID related purpose, hopefully we'll have connected everybody to resources for them to get their bill paid out. At that point, they still owe dollars and it's non-COVID related. We would attempt to set up payment plans with those individuals so that they could pay their bill. But we would not shut off their water. We would essentially zero out their account for the city so that they would not go into a water shut-off cycle. They would not go into a late fees cycle or anything like that. Instead, we would have them, Valley Collection would contact them to set up a payment plan for the amount that is owed. But up until that point, we are trying to connect those individuals that owe balances to the resources that would help them to pay those bills off.
Okay.
In addition to that, if they have that COVID related reason that they're not paying their bill, they would be eligible to sign up for a discount program and get a large portion of their water bill, utility bill, forgiven through the remainder of the fiscal year. So we're providing a lot of resources there to assist those people that are impacted by COVID-19 economically. And if those people that are not paying their bills and do not have a COVID purpose, they're still getting, because they're still not getting late fees, shut-off fees, they're not getting their water turned off. In addition to that, we will set up payment plans for them with no interest, no charges, for them to pay off the balances that they owe. So
Okay.
It really, it's not lumping everybody together as COVID that has a past due bill or non-COVID. We're giving them those resources to pay their bills and assistance, I guess that's suitable to what their needs are.
Okay. So I think for myself, I do believe that this is the city has definitely looked at this. The staff have, you know, uh, compassionately, I think that you all really did dive into this. I'm going to at least go with 1 month delay with the March 1st. Shifting everything up a month is where I would be. I think that allows for other programming to, we'll see what other programs will come out. I know there's an extension, even with the state that Jeff kind of cited, that the cutoff will be, I think it's December 4th is actually the date. And then we'll have a new administration nationally. And so maybe there'll be some more programming coming that way. So I'm comfortable with this, except I would prefer that it be everything shifted a month, with the exception of number 5.
Council, if I may interject here just quickly to play off of that. On behalf of students, just knowing on the timing piece that as this new administration comes in, it has been talked about that we may be going back into lockdown at some point for a 4 to 6 week time span. And when that happened in March, many students were furloughed or lost their jobs. And many are not eligible for federal or state aid because they're full-time students. And even if they were able to get unemployment through the state, it's still oftentimes not enough to cover their bills. So when we're talking about when to start water shutoffs and when to start collection again, and knowing that time period may be when we're either in lockdown or coming off of it, we may have many more citizens who are, including students and especially lower income people, who all of a sudden have a totally new financial situation than they do right now. So I would be in support of, and USG would be in support of, delaying this to ensure that students and other individuals in the city have, that there is time to know what that situation looks like as the new administration comes in and to see where COVID goes.
So thank you. What I've heard so far is there's no true consensus, except I did hear Weiner, Taylor, and myself suggest a 1-month delay. I heard Mayor Pro Tem suggest a delay. I think it was more of an indefinite delay. I sort of heard Councilor Burgess support a delay, but I wasn't certain if 1 month would be sufficient or not.
Actually, Mayor, I think implementing it sooner rather than later and being able to adjust in the future if the situation gets worse is most advantageous for our ability to plan and our ability to help get folks on payment plans.
Yes. And thank you for that correction. Now I recall. Yep.
Yeah,
So
I agree with Councilor Burgess. I think getting those balances off the city's, ledgers and actually so the people can start fresh with the city and try to set up a payment plan with the other company if they possibly can. I really think that is actually to their advantage as well. And as Councilor Burgess said, we can always make adjustments as we go forward. And I think to expect anything even remotely coming out of the new administration in any short period of time, I think is incredibly optimistic, given the divisions in Washington.
Mayor, can I ask another question? I really don't understand if you said, just Councilman said, this is for their benefit. If it's really this is for their benefit because they're gonna start fresh, why we just forgive them that? If we know that maybe they are not gonna pay it at all, what different the collection company going to do to those individual so it make them pay the collection and not paying the city? If those individuals have money, why should they pay the collections and the collection is not going to report it and not paying the city? In the same time, we are really taking the advantage for them, like taking the advantage that they can use the city bill to apply for assistance. Oh, I really don't understand that, Dennis. If you can just explain it for me.
Well, I think those people that are eligible for our assistance, we are connecting with in many ways as possible to give them that assistance. I'm guessing that the majority of those people that are going to be turned over to try and set payment plans are those that would not be eligible for assistance. Now,
But-
if it turns out that there are some that they're contacted to set payment plans and they are eligible for assistance, I don't believe we would have any problems trying to get that assistance to them. But we want to get the assistance to as many people as possible before they even get to that point. And so that's why we're making, like I said, we're making phone calls, sending letters, press releases, website postings, because we want to touch base with everybody to do everything we can to get those accounts paid off before we would go about trying to set up payment plans.
Are you sending it in different language or just English?
I'm sorry, pardon me?
Like the way that you communicate to those people, is this in different language or just English?
We're sending out the notices. I'm not sure of which languages they're being sent in. That I'm not aware of. I'm guessing that they're just being sent in our regular letters. So, but we are getting calls. We are directing them to other agencies, and we do have interpreter services if we are connected or contacted.
And this question for Jeff, if you can tell me how much money we have left in community and shelter house for assistance. Do you still have money or it's gone?
Yes, we still have money. I believe that Shelter House has requested an additional 25,000, an amendment. They have another 50 that they could request based on council's past resolutions. And I think community is still on their first allotment as well.
Yeah, that's what really clearly tell me some people don't know about it. And, word of mouth is really spreading very quick, especially among communities that they don't speak English. Maybe they come across to our, the advertising or the newspaper and everything, but they don't understand what's going on. That's why it's very important for us to give people time. The state just push their, utility bill to December. Maybe they go in with this pandemic, increasing, they will push it to January or February. If at least I can be open to support the 1 month that the mayor and, the few council said, but with really promise that we're gonna come back to it if things getting worse.
Yeah, and I think for me, the reason I say the 1 month is for various reasons, but it would allow us time to come back if we needed to. I did want to hear from Councilor Thomas.
Yeah, February 1st is 2.5 months from here, from where we are now. I mean, it seems to me there's time between now and February 1st to kind of monitor the situation. And if we feel once we have better information as we approach that date, if we find that, it makes sense to extend it another month, so be it. But for now, it seems with the forgiveness, with the payment plans, there's also the discounted rate. We're trying to get that information out that, as I understand it, that setting COVID aside, it may be possible for households to qualify for discounted utility rates. So there are a number of things in place here. It seems like a good plan. I'm for now feel the February 1st date seems reasonable. But as we get closer to that date, I think we can look at it again and evaluate whether it makes sense or not to extend it.
All right, so it sounds like I have a majority for extending it 1 month, unless someone has changed their thoughts. And those majorities, the individuals were Weiner, Taylor, Teague, and Mayor Pro Tem. Correct me if I'm wrong. All right, so it will be extended 1 month. All right. We have about 11 minutes left, so maybe. Yes, 11 minutes left. I wanted to go ahead and move on to council updates on assigned boards, commissions, and committees.
I don't have anything.
Okay. Anyone else? I know I had some things, but normally I have my little smiley face to remind me to report. All right. If nothing else for this time, I think we'll be adjourned until our 7 p.m. meeting, our formal meeting. And remember to sign into a different Zoom link for that meeting. So we'll see everybody later. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Bye.